Hi, I'm Caleb Giddings from Gun Nuts Media, and today me and Ruger are continuing our conversation about the 4 rules of gun safety. We previously talked about rule number 1, all guns are always loaded, and how it is more like a guideline. And the best way to interpret it would be to interpret it as treat every gun like it's loaded until you've personally verified that it isn't. Today we're going to talk about rule number 2, and rule number 2 is similar in that it's a guideline and not really a hard and fast rule, because rule number 2 is keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on the target. Why do we say rule number 2 is more like a guideline than a hard and fast rule? You would think on its surface, don't touch the trigger until your sights are on the target. That would be something that you could actually have as a hard and fast rule. And in many cases, and especially for new shooters, it absolutely is. But what if you're not a new shooter? What if you're interested in defensive uses of a firearm? What if you're interested in competition uses of a firearm? The further you get down that road, the more you're going to realize that sometimes you have to shoot without putting your sights fully on the target. Allow me to explain with a little visual example. So right now I'm carrying my 1911. This is my carry gun. It is loaded. All guns are always loaded. Cleared it out in a safe direction. Now you can see I have a clear gun. All right, so here's my example of how rule number 2 is more like a guideline. In a defensive situation, you could very realistically need to shoot someone from this position. You've got someone on you and you're trying to shoot them off of you. Well, my sights aren't on the target if I've got my hand up here and I'm trying to fight somebody off and I'm pulling this trigger. Similarly, in competition shooting, there are times where I won't really need to aim the gun because I'll have a hoser target that's like 2 meters away, and I can just sort of slam the gun out in the target's general direction, press the trigger, and get 2 alphas. So it's not that my sights always have to be perfectly dead aligned on the target before I can touch the trigger. The way we like to interpret rule number 2 in a way that makes sense is keep your finger off the trigger until you've made a conscious decision to fire. And I like that interpretation because it allows for those different situations where you may need to fire the gun without having your sights on the target, whether it's from a close-in retention position or whether it's something that you do where your draw technique maybe involves beginning to prep the trigger before your sights are fully on target. Regardless, there are situations where you may touchy the trigger before the sights are completely on the target. So how do we like to interpret this? It's just like I said. It's not a hard and fast rule. We want to be able to touch the trigger at times maybe when the sights aren't on the target. But we never want to touch the trigger unless we've made a conscious decision to finish touching the trigger, as it were, to pull the trigger, to prep the shot, to actually take the shot. So if I'm using a pressed out draw technique where I draw the gun and as I drive the gun towards the target, I'm beginning my trigger press, my sights aren't really on the target right here. The gun's in the general vicinity of the target and I've made the decision to fire. So it doesn't really matter where that trigger press starts because I'm going to shoot this gun. The same goes with that shooting from a retention position. If the gun's in here and I have to shoot somebody, I've made a conscious decision to fire this gun. All right, there's a dude who is in close contact with me and I need to shoot this fool off of me. So again, conscious decision to fire, I'm shooting the gun. So that's our interpretation of rule number 2. Not that you always have to have your sights perfectly leveled on the target in the awesome bullseye stance, but rather keep your finger off the trigger until you've made a conscious decision to fire. I'm Caleb Giddings. Thanks for watching. If you have questions about this video or you'd like to leave a comment or tell me that I'm dumb or that Jeff Cooper was God, please do that down in the comment section.